Hey, everybody, it's Tracy Brown, and I am so happy that you have decided to join in on this particular session in the Achieving Inclusion Summit. So, what is the Achieving Inclusion Summit? Hopefully, you are planning to be with us over the next 2.5 days so that you can be exposed to ideas and information and inspiration from me, Intentional Inclusion, and some of my friends, some old friends, some new friends. And our goal is really to help you develop more confidence as well as competence in being a leader who's committed to inclusion, a leader who is anti-racist, a leader who knows how to value diversity, and a leader who not only does that for themselves, but can help others do the same. The whole idea behind the Achieving Inclusion Summit began and when I was talking with clients and they were tired and they were rushing and they needed information, but they felt they didn't have time, like to go for a week-long seminar. And I said, wait a minute, why don't I just do some conversations with people and we can watch them or you can watch them when it's convenient. And it's kind of that breath, not breath of fresh air, but breath of, yeah, you can get a little information. You can go back into your day. You can come back a couple hours later and get a little information and you can share it with lots of people. So this session this week is one of my very favorite, even though it hasn't happened yet. I know it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites because I get the opportunity to have a conversation with someone I have been following for a couple of years, but we have never met before. And this gave us an opportunity to meet and to share information and to get connected. So the fact that you get to eavesdrop on our conversation, it's like great. But just be aware that we're having a conversation and we hope that you get something out of it too. My guest is Karen Fleshman, and this woman is an amazing example of someone who says, I have skills, I have experience, I have talent, and I want to use that for the benefit of not just myself and my family, but lots of different people. And not just lots of different people, but lots of different people who are very different from her. So I could tell you a lot. I could tell you all the reasons that I'm impressed by Karen Fleshman. I could tell you some of the guests, some of the conversations she's had with guests where I've been like, I've got to meet her. But instead of me talking about her for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to bring her into the stream and just say, thank you for saying yes and welcome, welcome, welcome. Right?
Thank you for having me. What a sweet introduction. I feel so honored. Thank you so much. I am so in awe of you and the work that you do, What Is Mine to Do, as well as your DEI practice. And I'm just so grateful to get to have this chance to get to know you.
Well, before we do that, I love you. But there are people who are watching who don't know you. So, what are maybe the 2 minute version of what's most important for people to know about you so that they'll have some context for this conversation?
Sure. I'm Karen Fleshman, she, her pronouns. I'm on the unceded territory of the Ohlone people, the land known as San Francisco, California. And I'm the founder of Racy Conversations. We are a workplace workshop facilitation company. We work with companies, nonprofits, universities, schools all across the United States, and we facilitate interracial conversations really designed to inspire the anti-racist generation is our tagline. And I founded Racy Conversations in 2014 after a career in social change. So the early part of my career was in the immigrants' rights movement. And then I shifted focus to youth workforce development in response to learning about joblessness and underemployment among Black and Latinx young people in particular. And yeah, that led me to become a mentor to many young Black and Brown adults as they began corporate careers and led to conversations about what it was like for them in the workplace. This deep sense of gratitude and appreciation that they had good paying jobs in fields that they loved doing. They loved doing their work. And at the same time, a lot of toxicity, a lot of it coming from women who looked like me. And it was listening to their stories that made me realize I wanted to shift focus from preparing young people of color for the workplace to preparing the workplace for young people of color. And that was the genesis of Racy Conversations. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I have heard you say that before, and of course, I've read it, in your bio. But I just like have to testify and say amen and yes, yes, and all of that because so many of us do or find ourselves doing the work with the communities that have been marginalized, discounted, ignored, blocked, whatever word you want to choose. And we forget, or we don't even realize how much work needs to be done in the normative community or the community that is already existing. And so you can't change things if the group the norms are set around are not aware of what's happening and are not willing to change.
Mm. Or feel threatened.
Okay, we're not going to quite go there yet because I did recently facilitated a workshop, and that right now I am still healing from the people who felt threatened by the fact that there were folks who were different from them that they needed to serve as part of their customer service. And so, and I bet it happens to you too. You do the work and you're always doing self care.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean that it is easy.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, yeah, it's going to take me a while. Luckily, I get to work with this group again, which some people would say, like, why would you want to go back? Because that's what I do.
Yes.
All right. And I have 4 weeks before I have to go back in. So I'm doing healing around people who feel threatened by the diversity that is so much a part of this multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational world that we live and work in.
Yes. Whereas I feel so much love and so much gratitude to be part of a multiracial, multi-generational, multi-sexual identity, multi-gender identity, multi-able. Uh, it is my greatest joy in life.
So one thing that I've been curious about. So along the way, you did something called go to law school.
Yes.
And you pass the bar, and like you're an attorney by training.
Mm.
And most people, not so much me, because I know a lot of attorneys who aren't, but the general stereotype or generalization about attorneys is that, attorneys, they're really focused on creating or maintaining an adversarial relationship, and they have to win and others have to lose. But you've been so deeply involved in creating alliances between groups that are really different from you and from each other throughout your career. So, how have you integrated those two things that most people think of as very separate?
That's so interesting. No one has ever asked me that question before. And I think it's true. I think we have a stereotype or a notion that lawyers are super combative and really want to win. I think largely because a lot of our exposure to attorneys is on TV shows, right? Where they're always in the courtroom fighting. In my experience, I went to law school because I was working for the city of New York, helping immigrants become citizens of the United States. And I went to law school because I wanted to serve the people better. I wanted to have the legal education that I needed to be a more effective at assisting immigrants to become citizens of the United States. So I never really went to law school. I wanted to change the system and I wanted to make things better, but I never really went because I wanted to quote, you know, because I'm a very competitive person. I'm not at all competitive. Like I'm, I don't like competitive sports. I like yoga or Zumba or something that you do as a group, but where we're not like one team wins and one team loses. That's just not how I see the world. So I guess that is how I now I would go to law school again in a heartbeat, because it did just give me so many more tools and insight. And I remember just the experience of reading the newspaper. I've been an avid newspaper reader my entire life. The experience of reading the newspaper pre-law school and post-law school, totally different. It gives you kind of an understanding of like the organizational structure behind everything that is very, very helpful.
I love that. Before law school, after law school, same newspaper, same media. And I think it's true, that I mean, that just makes sense. So I actually know that there are people watching right now who are watching because they are familiar with you and racy conversations, and they want to get more apparent, right? But there probably are some people who are watching who are not familiar with racy conversations. So what is racy conversations, and just say a little bit more about why you started it and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I working in the youth workforce development field. I became a facilitator. I was in a learning community with young people, and so I learned how to do different exercises to get conversations going, and how to set ground rules, and how to make things super interactive, and get people talking one on one with each other. So that is the knowledge base that I drew from to create Racy Conversations. And the way we operate, we tee up some material, we set some ground rules so folks know what the community agreements are. And then we get people talking with each other. And then we facilitate back, hey, what did you learn from your partner? And this is the structure of the conversation. And it's about everything. It's about unconscious bias and the relationship between unconscious bias and systemic racism. It's about what is yours to do and how do we actually practice and role play intervening in interpersonal racism. It's about looking at our systems and our processes and how are we going to change our practices to create a environment where everyone belongs and everybody can thrive. And it's about giving candid, honest feedback to one another and learning how to receive that feedback with grace, especially when someone is pointing out to you that you have areas where you can grow and improve.
And people don't really like talking about race and the impact of race. So it is so important, in my opinion, that you are doing this work and you are giving people the experience that you can do this and it can have a positive impact.
Yes, it can have a positive impact on white people. I firmly believe that European Americans, we carry a lot of intergenerational trauma as white people, both from our origins, our ancestors' origins in Europe before they came to this country. And then in this country, we're carrying secondary vicarious trauma from all the harm that we have inflicted for generations on Black people, on Native people, and all the ways that we've benefited from that harm being inflicted. And so when we try to pretend like that never happened. Try to walk around blind, or pretend that we have no work to do. I think that that causes us to wither. That causes our souls to diminish. It causes us to be very shallow and superficial. And um, it really eats at our humanity. And so when we say, you know what, I am going to be the cycle breaker, I am going to be the one who breaks away from the patterns of beliefs and behaviors that I grew up learning, and I'm going to create new beliefs and behaviors rooted in truth and compassion and love. And I'm going to do all that I can with my power and privilege to change things, and to work together across difference, to relate across difference as equals, so we can unite and transform ourselves, transform our communities to make things right. To me, that is the most, I don't know how to even describe it. It's the most um, filling, it's the most empowering, it's the most like beautiful manifestation of who we can be. And that's what I want. That's what I want for all people, to get rid of this fear and anger, and hatred, and to embrace love and kindness and real transformation.
One of the things that I love about the work that you're doing is this piece around, yes, we want to create a world where, and an environment where people are experiencing love and kindness and acceptance and all of those things. And you talk about that in such a powerful way, that it's not for just for others, but how much it would benefit white people to do this work, have these conversations, shift their perspective, learn new habits, and as you say, break the cycle, that they're breaking the cycle for themselves as well as everyone else. So that seems to not be said very much. Um, because many people are like, well, I want to be an ally to people of color. Many people who identify as white, oh, I'm going to be an ally to people of color. I want to make this world better so my children have a greater opportunity. But they rarely look in the mirror and say, as an adult who is white, here's how I will benefit from being anti-racist. So, I want you to just talk more about that.
Yeah. And if you measure how much I will benefit by being anti-racist by things like my bank balance or things like that, you might say, okay, where's the proof, where's the evidence, lady, that you're actually benefiting from this stuff? But I will say this, I had to give up a lot. I had to leave my husband. I um I got fired from my job. I lost different relationships, etc. When I decided that this was important, and this was the direction I wanted to take in my life. But what I gained is so much more. Not to be transactional, but what I gained in the sense of community, in the sense of relationships, in the sense of spirit, you know, um, and of really having just incredible mentors and role models and experiences of being in deep community and expanding, really expanding. I feel like white supremacy, patriarchy has us all like crumpled in, and when you start to to cast that aside and really become cognizant of all the people who have come before you and who have pushed the boulder up the hill for so long behind you, right? Today, Harry Belafonte passed away. You know, what an incredible artist, activist, contributor to humanity, what he did over the course of his life. So, all these people coming behind, and then thinking about what I want for future generations, and that I can't let those people who came before me down. I mean, they pushed so hard. On my watch, I better be sure that I am advancing things and not leaving it worse for the future generations than they left it for me. And this deep sense of connection, not only to the past and to the future, but also to my peers, to people like you. You know, you, Tracy, doing this work every day, and thousands of people all across this country. And I have to say, you know, I have a lot to say about social media and how you know, detrimental it can be and harmful in some ways. But I am so grateful to social media because it's allowed me to find people like you and to feel that I'm not only part of a local group of people, but I'm a part of a national and an international group of people who are all working toward a common goal, and to be in community, even though we're not, you know, next door neighbors, is such a gift.
Yeah, and that connection is so inspiring on those days where it's really hard, or there's been something that someone said or did, um, and social media is good for, or social media and the internet connections and all the technology we have does allow us to connect. It also has been instrumental in giving voice and view to all the things that some of us, including you, right, have known they've it's always been happening. But for all the people who were in denial, you can't deny watching the video. You can't deny that someone could post something, could be live streaming to social media while they're being arrested or detained, and you see it happening in real time. You cannot deny
Mm-hmm.
what is going on anymore. And I find it still challenging that there are folks who think it's only happening when I see it on a live stream or on social media, instead of realizing that one video you saw, that happened 500 times in this nation that day.
Mm.
You just
That
saw
you
one,
didn't see.
right? You just saw one video, but it might represent 10 or 500 or 1,000 examples that are happening. They just didn't happen on camera.
100%. And here in California, you know, they're happening in our rural communities, on our Native American reservations. They're happening far from cameras, and that's those are our parts, because we think of California as having a lot of police brutality in our cities, but it's really in these other parts that are like the Central Valley, where it is very, very, very commonplace. And people think of California as being so progressive, right? But we have to remember California has more Trump voters than any other state. And we have extreme, extreme wealth inequality and a long history of police brutality. We originated mass incarceration. And we have the Police Officers Association and the Correctional Officers Association united in this big, very powerful lobbying block that makes it extremely difficult to build toward police accountability and to decarcerate here in California.
Wow.
Sorry. Yes, I know that is a heavy topic. That's super heavy. So, yes, let's take a beat and.
Well, it's super heavy because it's super real.
Mm.
And those of us who are doing this work all the time, we know we're constantly balancing what's the big picture that's going on in the world. And, oh, I'm going to work with employees in this organization this week. So I know all of this is going on, but I'm going to go in here and convince them or equip them to recognize there's value in their multi-ethnic team and they're serving multi-ethnic customers. And so it's like you're dealing with the little micro, but you can't do that effectively if you're not aware of how this team and this company and this organization, they all are pieces that fit together to allow the macro, to the big picture, to happen. So you just came from out here. Now I want you to come in here.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you say to teams in a nonprofit or teams that you work with? Like what is important and how they can benefit from getting beyond the racial stereotypes and generalizations and really work together?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I start things by telling them my story and what I learned about race and racism growing up. And then I ask people what is harmful, inaccurate, and racist about what I learned growing up. And then how similar or dissimilar is it from what you learned growing up? And I think that is a very important level setting because so many people, so many white people learned what I learned. Racism is terrible. Dr. Martin Luther King is wonderful. And the way to not be racist is to be colorblind and treat everybody the same. Only when you start to ask, well, why is there so much racial inequality? The story you get back is, well, we used to have terrible racial inequality, but then there was a civil rights movement, and now opportunities are distributed equally. And some families like ours work super hard, and that's why we have what we have, and other families choose not to. And that's why they're in the situation that they're in. And I feel so, so grateful that I had a very unusual career path as a white woman. I almost every organization I worked for was people of the global majority were in the majority. And almost every supervisor I worked for was a woman of color. And so I had to figure out, how do I show up as a white person in this space? And then looking at my supervisors, listening to them, observing how they interacted, I had the best role models of what it is to see the humanity and connect with the humanity and to really uh, lead in a loving way, and they gave me so much feedback too on times when I did things, I caused harm or just my bias was showing. And so through their grace, that's how I learned how to do that. So I try to impart those same lessons because not everyone has had the benefit of having this kind of experience that I have. And that's what I'm trying to impart through the racy conversations is, how do we show up? What is it to relate across differences as equals? What is it to listen more, talk less, be accountable, not make harmful assumptions and stereotypes about people, but really, see the beauty and the humanity in everybody. And that includes, self compassion as well, because we can't do this if we're constantly like in this guilt and shame and terrible feelings about our own self. That's non-sustainable.
I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. I'm just sitting here going, oh, this is so cool. This is so wonderful. And it's so important.
Thank you, thank you.
So,
And I really I what's the right word to describe it? On the one hand, I am so demoralized by all the violence happening right now, by the Supreme Court, by just this unending barrage of just horrific violence and inhumanity occurring in our society. And on the other hand, I'm so energized, like by the Tennessee Three, and just by young people, and uh, my friend Syra Rao is organizing this massive anti-gun movement. We're meeting in Denver on June 5th to demand that the governor of Colorado sign an executive order banning guns and buying them back. I feel like we're at this point where they have gone so far extreme on the other side that now, lots of people are coming together to say, hey, this is not what we want. This is just too much. And it's not working for anyone except for the 1%, which racism is the biggest diversionary tactic there is. That is the thing that makes me so furious, is that, I learned this from Dr. Kendi. The racism does not begin with the ignorance and hate. Racism begins with profiting from racism, and then the people who are profiting from racism being like, well, how can I maintain this? Okay, yes, now
right.
I'm going to engender a lot of fear and ignorance and hate.
But more and more people are opening their eyes and opening their hearts, or you and I would like not continue to do. Like we both see and get a chance to engage with people who are desiring, not only desiring change like out there, but wanting to be a part of the change. And I get a fair amount of opportunities to talk to people from all racial and ethnic groups about this. In fact, on the What Is Mine to Do, in the What Is Mine to Do group, about 3 times a year, I run a 5-day challenge called Break the Silence Challenge. And it's especially for people who want some help and some guidance and some practice in talking about, and how do I interrupt conversations, how do I let it be known that I am anti-racist, or that I really am not willing to allow racism to continue the way it always has been. But I'm a Black woman, so I want you to speak directly to people who are white, who
Mhm.
want to be anti-racist, but they're still hesitating about speaking up or getting involved, or they're afraid of being misunderstood by
Mm.
their coworkers or their family members.
Mm-hmm.
And you already spoke a little bit to there's benefits and there's risks. But just for the next 2 minutes, I'm going to put you full screen. And would you talk to white people for me?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. So you want me to talk to white people about how to intervene in a way that feels natural, in a way that um you can maintain the relationship with the person. Maybe it's your mother-in-law or someone in your life that you uh, have a long-standing relationship with, and you still want to maintain that relationship, but you need to express your views. So how can you do that? you know um, you can ask them, hey, I heard you just say that. What's a good example? I heard you just say that affirmative action harms white people, or I'm not going to be able to get into college, or my kid won't be able to get into college because of this, and it's not fair. And tell me why that's true for you. Like, have you actually experienced that? Why are you fearing that? Yeah. Well, I used to fear that too. I was concerned that maybe I wouldn't be able to go to college, or the main college that I wanted, and I didn't think it was really fair, that I had these certain grades or did this or that, and why should my opportunities be limited because of the color of my skin? And then I started to learn more about it. I started to learn more about the racial wealth gap. I started to realize that our opportunities, like intelligence and talent, is very widely distributed in our society, but only some folks have access to really great schools, and that's largely tied to the color of your skin, and that's where a lot of the opportunities flow out of those experiences. And that really, it would benefit everyone in our country if we all had access to a great education. That's not going to harm me if more people of color attain college education or get a good job. That's going to create greater prosperity for everybody. And it's not just me versus them. It's about what's going to benefit us all, is to have um, a society where there's not just like a huge concentration of opportunity with some people and a lot of people who have no access to that. And that's what I stand for now. So I'm not like judging that person. I'm not saying you are racist, you're some backwards hillbilly, or you know, um, I am superior and greater than you, because that is also not part of anti-racist practice, right? There is no hierarchy, but you're just bringing them along in your evolution and creating that opening to have further conversations with them.
I love that. And I knew you would have something valuable to say because actually, I think my first exposure to you, I think, was with Collect Your Cousins.
Oh yes.
And I was like, who is this? Talking about collect your cousins. Like, yes, you go collect your cousins and help them understand that not only is this important for the long-term benefit of all people, but all people includes white people.
Yes.
And so we haven't talked about collect your cousins. So tell the people about collect your cousins because they should know.
Yes. So collect your cousins is really came out of working with Resma Menachem, who I highly, highly recommend everyone read My Grandmother's Hands and do the practices in My Grandmother's Hands, because his whole teaching is around how Anti-racism is not an intellectual exercise. It's not like, something that we're going to think our way out of, but that we've actually carried the trauma, whether we've been harmed by racism or we are the people who have caused harm by racism. We're carrying that trauma in our bodies, and he gives us exercises and helps us to heal, to metabolize that harm, so we don't repeat those patterns of behavior. But I went to his workshop at Omega Institute, and he said, "White people, let me tell you, you have one mission in this movement, and that is to collect your cousins. And by the way, you can't collect your cousins with FU white people energy. The only way you can collect your cousins is by embracing and loving on your cousins, even when you drastically disagree with them." And that's something that has been so hard for me, to grasp. I have another incredible mentor, Sweetwater Nana. She's a native Alaskan woman, and she comes from a long line of healers. She's the founder of Idle No More Washington, does incredible spiritual activism, rooted in native practices. And she says, "Karen, the reason why white activism is so ineffective is that it's rooted in fear and anger. And the reason why native activism is so powerful is because it's rooted in spirit and love." So I try to keep that in my heart, even when I'm extremely frustrated and angry at people, to still see their humanity and to still recognize them as my cousins, and to still also have the humility to see, I'm just very, very lucky that I've had different experiences than this person, but I'm not any better than they are.
Right. And that's really hard to maintain, or it takes work, conscious work and intention, because we do live in a society that's very binary. And so it's like we've been socialized, right, to operate as, well, I'm better than this person, or if you're up, then I'm down. So for me to be up, that means I have to put you down. And this work requires something very, very different.
Yes, 100%. I also always come back to, you can see her right there, Audre Lorde, when she's talking about, she's talking to women after we failed to get the Equal Rights Amendment in 1980. She gives a paper called Age, Race, Class, and Sex, Women Redefining Difference. And she said, our greatest challenge as women, the reason why we've made so little progress in this country, is because every time we try to get together and work towards social change, we have no patterns of relating across differences as equals. We only know how to relate in this hierarchy, in this binary. And she says, if we are to succeed, we have to learn how to relate across differences as equals, to see our differences not as something to be squashed or suppressed, but as a source of energy, a source of fuel for our activism. And she says at the end, she says, for the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house.
It's like, oh, when you say it or when you read it, when I first read it, it's like, oh, that's like clear, and it makes so much sense. I'm going to remember that, right? You cannot fix something with the consciousness that created it. So,
that's beautiful.
So I love that. And our time is so close to being up.
Oh no. I could talk forever.
Our time was up 5 minutes ago, but I was like, no, we got to do this and this. And now I still have a list of 5 more things I want to ask you. So we're going to have another conversation. But we need to close this one out. So I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath and think of what is the one thing that you want to either emphasize, reinforce, or share.
Wow. The one thing, I think the one thing is take action, right? I have been feeling, demoralized, depressed, January 6th, all the way. I mean, obviously, even before then, it's been so much trauma and so much repeated bombardment. And then you start to numb out. I know I start to numb out. And the solution to not numbing out, the solution to not just joining a book group or raising your awareness is to take action and to find, 1, 2, 3 people who want to take action together. And if we each just focus on our little corner, whether it's our kids' school or our apartment building or our workplace or our house of worship or whatever it may be, there's someone that there. If each of us works on our little corner, that's how we're gonna build the energy up, that is going to transform everything.
Yes, and yes. So, everybody watching, if this is your first introduction to Karen Fleshman, then I am trusting that you totally understand why it was so important to me to invite her to be in this conversation as part of the Achieving Inclusion Summit. Thank you so much, Karen. I know that we're going to talk again.
Thank you so much, and please, yeah, I also want to share here for the kids, the number 4, hereforthekids.com, to learn more about this massive movement to ban guns and buy them back. Please do get involved.
I love it. So, everybody, just stay tuned to the Achieving Inclusion Summit for the rest of the week. You can find the schedule. There's information in the description where you can go and download or view the schedule. You can register and receive the schedule, a copy of it. And we have so many great conversations coming up, as well as a series of Tracy's tips about several different topics that clients have asked me specifically to address during the summit. My name is Tracy Brown. I cannot thank you enough for watching and for sharing this conversation and all the others in the summit this week. Bye for now.